Hey y'all, it's your girl Hope Your TV Movie Bestie, and I watch good shit. And I just got done watching the season finale of Matlock, season 2. Now, y'all, so it's 2 episodes, and these 2 episodes were deliciously rewarding. This was like a perfect ending to me to the season. Now, hang on, sit back, get comfortable, because this is gonna be a long video. It was 2 full episodes, and I'm gonna cover both of them in this one video. So, get locked in. Here we go. Now, in the beginning, Maddie is dreaming about losing everything. And she's having this wild, crazy dream about what happens if it all, blows up in her face. Julian, he is practicing telling his kids that he made a mistake. Sarah, she finds out that there was like a mix-up with her birth certificate because if you remember, she is trying to find her birth parent. She's adopted. And she finds out she is not actually 28. She's really 30. And she's like, what? Like, okay, that's crazy. You 2 years older. You ain't even in the right decade no more. Like, Maddie's like, happy belated birthday, kiddo. Now, Maddie, she meets with the DOJ. So she meets with a lady named Lena. And she's like, look, I have a criminal conspiracy case that needs to happen without your superiors knowing about this until an arrest is made. And I also have an informant who's Julian, and he's going to need an immunity deal. And Lena is like, whoa, this is a lot. Like, I never even ran a sting operation. Maddie uses this quote, which I love. Y'all know I love quotes. And she said, what did you write in your 8th grade yearbook? And she said, if a hero isn't coming, I will a hero become. And I was like, I love that. So y'all know I wrote it down. Now, Lena's like, I don't know if I can do this. Maddie's like, look, you've been in your job for 16 years and you've never led a sting. Like, this is because they're holding you back. But this case, it about to change the whole trajectory of your career. Lena's like, well, I would have to verify your information before I can accept anything. And so she's like, okay. So she slides her Julian's name and number and says, give him a call so y'all can talk. Maddie spends a lot of this episode wondering what happens after the end. Because the end is Senior going down, her getting justice for Ellie, the study being exposed. What's next? Like, what comes after? All she's been focusing on is getting Senior. So Edwin is like, well, everything's going to change. Like, everybody is going to know who we are. And hopefully, they'll spare Alfie. And Maddie's like, oh my gosh, we have to tell Joey. Edwin is like, yeah. So much for that whole, like, being honest thing. Because, they ride him a lot about him being dishonest with them. And now they have to tell him, oh, by the way, we've been lying to you the entire time we have known you. Maddie's like, look, we just going to tell him we did everything for Ellie and he's going to have to kind of accept it. Maddie, back at work, is working on a case, her and Olympia. And one of the people that they have to get on the stand is this elderly lady. Maddie's like, Olympia, I should go and be lead on this case because if we have to kind of destroy this woman's story, it looks better coming from an older lady already. And so Olympia's like, okay. And Maddie says, and also, it might be my last day in court. Olympia's like, we don't know that. Like, we don't know that, once all this comes out that you'll lose your license. Maddie's like, well, even if I don't, I ain't gonna be able to work here no more. And Olympia's like, well, I'll fight for you. And Maddie's like, yeah, that's not going to matter, Olympia. Like, they're not going to let me keep working here. So Olympia says, well, what if we open our own law firm? Maddie's like, what? And she's like, yeah, we could call it Lawrence, her last name, and Kingston, Maddie's real last name, since, she'll be exposed. I want us to keep working together. She's like, I'm about to lose a lot of stuff when all this comes out. I don't want to lose this, what we have. Maddie's just kind of like, she's toying with the idea. Sarah has a decision to make, whether she's going to join Olympia's team or she's going to stay on Julian's team. Well, at this point, we want her to join Olympia's team because Julian, he's going to come out as part of this cover up and he might lose his license or go to jail or something. And then that would screw Sarah. So they're like, Sarah's got to choose Olympia. Well, Sarah, of course, chooses Julie. And so Julian is like, no, because Julian thought, oh, she definitely going to choose Olympia. And he's like, Sarah, you know what? I actually been thinking about making a change, getting out of here, going to do my own thing. And so Sarah's like, okay, that's cool. I could see that benefiting me too. If you take me. And he's like, I don't really know how things are going to go. I don't think I can take you. And she's like, oh, okay. She goes to Maddie. She tells Maddie about Julian leaving. And she's like, I guess y'all already knew, right? And Maddie's like, oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I got some Team Olympia again. Maddie's like, well, that's okay. Like, it's not a bad thing. When I first started here, you thought Olympia hung the moon. And she's like, I know. And she's like, but the difference is with Julian, I'm part of the inner circle. And she's like, here, it's you and Olympia. And she's like, oh, no. She's like, we trust you. We respect you. We want you on the team. She's like, I thought Julian would take me with him like they did in that movie, y'all. And she goes, the lady from Bridget Jones's Diary and Top Gun. She said with the goldfish. I said, is she talking about Jerry Maguire? Like one of my absolute favorite movies. And so Maddie goes, Jerry Maguire? And she says, whatever it's called. And I said, Sarah, what in the world? Like, y'all, that just broke my heart because I adore Jerry Maguire. I will watch Jerry Maguire right now this very day. So anyways, I had a little laugh about that. Sarah, she's like, okay, well, either way, I'm glad that I get to keep working with you, Maddie. And she's like, I really developed a friendship with you. I care about you. I'm glad that I get to stay here. Maddie's kind of like, yeah. In her mind, she's thinking this and she's like, I hate that I keep lying to Sarah, because Sarah really don't know who she is at all. Lena, the DOJ lady, she meets with Julian and she asks if Julian is prepared to testify against his father and ultimately put him in jail. And so Julian's like, oh, yeah, I'm good to go. And she's like, why? Why are you so eager to do that and so sure? She said, because I'm risking like my whole career on this case. And if you walk away, I'm screwed. And so Julian is like, well, I don't want to be my father. So she said, okay, I'll take a look over all of the evidence that y'all got this evening. And then if it holds up, you got your immunity deal. So Julian's like, okay, great. Maddie, Edwin, and Alfie, they all come clean to Joey. They said, Joey, when you popped up in our life again, we was deep in this case and we just couldn't be fully honest with you because we had a lot going on. So they like, sorry, like you forgive us? How do you feel? And Joey's like, y'all did what? So he's like, wow. And he said, you know what? I think it's badass. And he was like, and y'all did all this for Ellie? This is the ultimate justice for her. So they like, whew, okay, great. You get it. He's like, but wait now. So y'all committed crimes, right? He's like, y'all been lying to a lot of people. And he said, what if y'all go to jail? And so Maddie's like, well, basically we got all this money. So we lawyered up. I'm old, Edwin old. They ain't gonna try and send us to jail. We was just trying to get justice for our daughter. They're like, and if worse comes to worse, Alfie will go to Georgia and live with his aunt, Maddie's sister. Y'all, here go Alfie with what? Alfie says, or I could just stay here. Joey could move in and I could keep going to school and everything would be the same. Alfie, are you crazy? Absolutely not. Sir, what world do you think that's going to fly in? This man about 2 days sober. Like, So Joey's like, absolutely. I would love that. What? Edwin and Maddie are like, Alfie, why don't you go on in the kitchen and we just gonna talk to Joey a little bit. Joey, we like you and everything. And he's like, I know. He's like, yeah, Alfie is crazy. Like, of course I'm not gonna live here while y'all in jail, and like, I just got sober and I'm not even a stable parent. And they're like, oh, okay, you get it. And so he's like, yeah, I just didn't want to, like, make him think I didn't want him again. And so they're like, okay, cool. We'll figure out something. We ain't going to jail no way, so don't even worry about it. And they was like, you just wanted us to be the bad guy. And he's like, well, yeah, it's penance for y'all lying to me all this time. And they like, touche. So Olympia and Maddie, they're talking. Olympia suggests Maddie don't even come forward. And Maddie's like, wait, what? And she's like, yeah. So the DOJ, they're going to build their whole case around Julian, his confession, Senior. Why do you need to come forward? We don't have to say it was because your daughter, was part of the opioid crisis and all that. We don't even have to mention you. We can completely leave you out. You coming forward is not going to change what's going to happen with the case. Like, it's a strong enough evidence at this point to just go forward. Why ruin all these lives? Julian's going to get a deal, so he'll be fine. If you come forward, it could put your law license in jeopardy, and it would temporarily stop our working relationship. Maddie's just like, I never thought about that. So she goes to Edwin, and she's telling Edwin at night, and Edwin's like, wait, so you would just stay Maddie Matlock? And she's like, yeah. And he said, okay, and I would also stay dead because I'm your dead husband in this whole story. And she's like, yeah, that is kind of a problem. And so he's like, and what about our old life? And she's like, well, we closed everything out when, we left. And she's like, ain't nobody gonna miss us. It's just us. It'll be okay. I have enjoyed being Maddie Matlock. Again, and thinking about the end, I didn't think about what comes next. And she said, I'm gonna really miss Maddie Matlock. And I thought, me too. That's the next day. And Sarah is overhearing Maddie and Olympia talking. And so they are really floating this idea around about Lawrence and Kingston. And, they're arguing because Maddie's like, well, we're going to be using my money to fund the law firm, so it should be Kingston and Lawrence. Sarah is hearing this. And Sarah's like, Olympia about to start her own law firm. So she goes to Maddie and she's like, Maddie, I overheard y'all talking. Who is Kingston? And Maddie's like, oh shit. It's code. It's nobody. Y'all know Sarah. She is an excellent researcher. And she's like, I've been looking and I can't find nobody named Kingston. And so Maddie's like, no. Don't keep looking. She's like, it's just a code word. It ain't nobody. And she said, we're not ready to talk about who she's going to be partnering with or if it's even going to happen. It's still kind of up in the air. And so Sarah's like, well, just tell me who it is. And so Maddie's like, I can't tell you. And she's like, oh, okay. Because earlier today you told me that I was part of the inner circle and that y'all really trust me and y'all want me here on the team, but you can't tell me this. Okay, message received. So, Sarah's really hurt. Maddie feels bad. I'm like, dang, I feel bad for Sarah too, because Sarah's just looking for like a place to belong. So that sucks. Now, plot twist, y'all. I said, what? Julian is in Senior's office. They're talking. Lena, the DOJ, she calls. Julian is like, hold on, I gotta take this phone call. So he's like, hello. He said, it's the new babysitter, because that's who they've been saying he'd been meeting with, talking. He said, hey. And so she's like, are you alone? And he said, nope. We definitely don't let the kids drink a lot of soda. And she said, okay. She's like, well, I just want to let you know that the bank records y'all found, from Deborah Palmer and making the withdrawal, the $350,000, she said those are fake. They've all been fabricated. What? So then Julian goes to Maddie and Olympia and he's like, y'all, Senior knows. Senior been faking this whole dementia shit. He don't have dementia. He's been faking. He was working with Deborah Palmer. They made up this whole story. She's in on it. And he been watching them all along. Olympia and Juliet, he been watching them. And they're like, oh my gosh. And also, shout out to one of my besties who said this in one of the comments on another video. She said, I bet Senior is faking this whole thing. You was right, girl. You were right. So then they're like, oh shit, what about the study? Y'all, they go look in the filing cabinet, whatever. The study back in the files. So they're like, oh my gosh, there's no crime. Like, all they have to do is say it's a clerical error, that the study has been here all along and it just didn't get entered into the system. And they're like, fuck. Like, y'all, devastation, complete devastation. Okay, so that's the end of 15. Now we go to 16, and I'm thinking, where do we go from here, y'all? Maddie, she's like, no. Senior does not get to make his crimes disappear again. And she's like, look, we got to start fresh. We got to start from everything we had right before we got Deborah's financial records. And Julian's like, how are we going to build a case in 4 days? And they have to do it in 4 days because that's when the merger goes through. And remember, Senior said he got dementia. And so Julian convinced him to retire. And so he has this sweet little golden package deal. And once he retires, Senior will be paid very nicely. And so they're like, no, we have to get him while he's still in power. So Maddie's like, look, we don't have a choice. We have got to get this done. And she's like, look, if this don't work, I will come forward. I will go on all the socials. I will not stop telling this story. And I will ensure that Senior never has another day of peace. And they like, okay, Maddie. Olympia and Julian, they agreed to get back on the money trail. And Maddie says she's going to go visit Emmeline, which is, remember, she was the Reddit person who, Maddie got all this information that found out that they hid the study, all that. She's now a dog groomer because remember they fired her. So Maddie shows up and she's like, nope, I'm not talking to you. I don't want to deal with you at all. Her friend, Hank, is like, you did her so dirty. Like, you pretended to be her friend to get her to come forward with this information. You used it, text her for a little while, and then you just ghosted her. He said you had a drink with her, and then you left her. He said you toasted and ghosted her. And Maddie's just like, and he's like, yeah, we don't want to talk to you. Bye. The money part, that's starting to look good. Turns out the wolf, Lester, he was in Dallas the same day before Senior went to Australia. And that means that Senior must have given Wolf the cash at that point. And they can kind of sort of prove that because the cargo weights were different before and after. And after, the cargo weight was less, like 9 pounds, 11 ounces, which Olympia has looked up is the weight of a duffel bag plus $350,000 in $100 bills. I said, damn, Olympia's good. So Maddie's like, yes, okay, we got this piece of information. Olympia and Maddie, they strategizing because they like, we got to figure out, what's the next step? What else we got to do? So they strategizing and they get drunk. Just toe up. Now, as they're going through information that they got, they find out, y'all, it's worse than we thought. All the partners knew about the hidden study. All of them got together in Dallas and they went to a dinner. Yeah, they were all in on it. So they must have decided at this dinner together to conceal the study. So Olympia's like, we need to get the footage of all them at this dinner. And she's like, how can we get that? Because only top partners have access to that information. Now, all the while they strategizing and going through this information, they just steady getting drunk and they are hilarious. I especially enjoy their friendship because they're so funny and cute together. Next day, Edwin, he is making Maddie breakfast. You know, she's hungover. She got her sunglasses on. She's like, stop talking so loud. She said, Edwin, did I tell you everything? Did I give you the updates? And he's like, yes, you did. He said, while laughing your head off. And he said, you know, this is the laugh you had with Ellie. He said, you had a special laugh with Ellie. I only heard it when you were around Ellie. And he said, last night, I heard it again. And he said, I hadn't heard it in so long. And it made me realize something, that you laugh like this with Olympia. And he was like, I can't take that from you. And I don't even want to take that from you. And she's like, wait, what are you saying, Edwin? And he's like, why don't you stay, be Maddie Matlock for a few more years? But I'm not going to stay dead. I think Maddie needs a boyfriend. And he says, you know, perhaps an IRS agent. Because remember, a few episodes ago, he pretended to be the IRS agent to get the financials from Deborah. Maybe they ran into each other in the office and they felt a few sparks. And she's like, okay, we can work with that story. Alfie comes in. And Alfie's like, I want to apologize. And they're like, about what? And he said, you know, I was totally against this whole Georgia thing, living with my aunt. And he said, but it probably ain't going to happen. And he said, and even if it does, she's my aunt and y'all have done so much for me. I can, you know, stay with my aunt for a few years or whatever. And so I said, look at this. Compromising for the ones you love. All right, I love to see it. Olympia, she meets with Eva. Now, remember, Eva is Senior's ex-wife, and she's actually a partner in charge, and she has access to this kind of footage that they need. They meet, they having lunch, and Eva's like, look, we don't do this. What you want, girl? And so she says, number one, because she's like, we got to tell her that Senior's faking his dementia. Because if she thinks that Senior has, you know, gotten over on her, oh, she ain't going to stand for that. So they're like, yeah, Senior's faking his dementia. And she's like, what? And she's like, yep, he's faking it. And then she tells her the whole story about the study. Eva said, Lord have mercy, I need a drink. She said, where the waiter at? She said, I got to get a drink. So she orders a Tom Collins with extra cherries. That's exactly one of the orders that was on the receipt that let them know that all the partners had been there, because it was 6 drinks that was ordered, 6 partners. And Olympia is like, oh shit. She was there, y'all. So he was like, let me see what you got, Olympia. And Olympia's like, ooh. So she opened it up and she see that receipt and she see her drink order. And she's like, okay, well, I guess you know that I know and I know that you know. She's like, what we gonna do? Olympia's like, how long have you known about me? Like, after Senior? And she said, well, I haven't known all this time. She said, the other day when I came in here, I went to Senior and I'm like, why are you retiring? Because you never wanted to retire and now you just happy to go. I don't understand. And so she said, when she confronted him about that, he told her why he has to retire, why the merger has to go through, and it's also that he can save himself. And so Olympia's like, you agreed to help save him? I thought you don't even like this man. And she's like, no, I agreed to survive him again. She says she had just gotten divorced from Senior. They had this very public, terrible divorce. And she said she went to this meeting in Dallas, and Senior starts to say that the partner in charge in Miami is retiring. And so he said, Eva, do you want the job? And she was like, of course she wanted the job. So she said, I said, absolutely. She took it. And then he started telling everybody about hiding this well-practiced study. I realized that he wasn't giving me an opportunity or, trying to settle our divorce. He was implicating me in this crime that he's committed. Olympia's like, but you could have just left. Like, you could have just walked away from the deal and then you wouldn't have been involved. I could have. And she's like, but change doesn't happen on the outside. Change comes from within. You can only do things if you have a seat at the table. So here I am. All we got to do is let's me and you make a deal. And she said, Senior's about to retire. He's about to be gone, which means he can't do more damage. I have the ears of the other partners. If I even hint at a scandal involving this study, she said they're going to do whatever I tell them to do. I can get you a real social justice department. We got a deal? And then Olympia's like, well, what if I don't accept? And Eva said, look, I'm not going to rat you out. I'm also not going to help you. He put that study back. So what's the crime? What evidence, what case do you have? Olympia's like, damn. So Maddie, meanwhile, she shows up to Emmeline's job. She got a dog now. And she starts to talk to her. She's like, can we talk? We used to be friends. Emmeline's like, what you got to say? And so she tells her the reason she toasted and ghosted her was because Alfie had gotten into some trouble, after she was fired. Emmeline's like, what kind of trouble he got into? Girl, he started shoplifting. I said, Lord have mercy. Oh, a tangled web we weave when first we start to deceive. You got to lie and lie and lie and lie and just keep on lying. Emmeline's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And she's like, I know. She said, then, once we got Alfie straight, she said so much time had passed. I was embarrassed that I hadn't reached out to you. And so then I just didn't. It had just been a mess. And Maddie says, but I realized it's never too late to do the right thing. And she's like, so that's why I'm back. And so Emmeline's like, I missed you. And Maddie's like, I missed you too. So now Maddie has this evidence because they need Emmeline to testify and say, yes, she knows that Senior hid this study because this supports Julian. Maddie is going to get her to do that by telling her some information that she has on Hank, her little boyfriend or whatever, that, he been talking to other women or whatever. And in talking to Emmeline, she's just like, dang, Emmeline, she's been through a lot, right? Emmeline is saying, I was really lonely. I felt invisible after you and I stopped being friends and you stopped reaching out. I'm not like you. I don't have a grandson. I don't even have kids. I didn't have anybody. And then all of a sudden one day I met Hank. He was, I guess, the barista at Dunkin' Donuts. One day he asked me for my name and then we've been happy ever since. Maddie is kind of like, dang, I don't want to kill her vibe. Like, she's happy. She's been through enough. So she doesn't. Olympia and Maddie are back together and they're talking. So they're working on their case and they start talking about, how did it go when Maddie went to talk to Emmeline? And Maddie's like, I didn't do it. I didn't tell her the evidence. And Olympia's like, girl, why? We need her to testify. Like, the study is back. We don't have anything from Julian now. It's just Julian saying he took the study out, but the study back. So we need Emmeline to testify. And Maddie is like, I've been thinking about what you told our client about the fallacy of sunken costs. Now, y'all, this was a big life lesson here. So the fallacy of sunken cost is about continuing to do something even though you know it won't work because you have already invested so much. Instead of stopping and assessing what's really going on and then figuring out the best way forward, you continue down this path of no return. Maddie is like, what if that's what I'm doing? I think that is what I'm doing. And Olympia's like, wait, what are you saying, Maddie? I think Eva's partly right. Senior is about to retire. He's about to be out of there, so he can't do anything else. And it's against his will, so he's kind of losing. If you take Eva's deal, you're going to get your whole Justice Department. She will push out the other partners, start fresh. Julian won't lose his license, and he can keep on doing good work together. Olympia's just like, but what about Ellie? Because this was all about Ellie getting justice for Ellie. So you just giving up on that? Maddie says, I think I've been looking at this wrong the whole time. What if Maddie led me here to you? And Olympia's like, oh. And I think this is how it's supposed to go. So in walks Julian. And Julian's like, what y'all talking about? So Maddie's like, I think I'm going to let it go. And Julian said, what? Let it all go? Like, you're not going to try to take my dad down? And she said, yeah, like, I think I'm just let it go. Julian's like, no, I can still come forward. Like, it'll be fine. I can get him to confess. And Maddie's like, but what if it doesn't work? And even if you go to jail, still not going to bring Ellie back. I thought this was so profound because anger is a great motivator, right? Like Maddie is mad. She's been mad about losing her daughter. She's been mad about this whole cover up, about, corporate companies winning. And that has fueled this pursuit of first Julian, then Senior. And it's like, that requires so much energy. To fight, it requires a lot of energy. And sometimes letting it go, sometimes that's the win. That's the real win. Because your peace of mind is like better than anything. For Maddie to just be able to say, let's just let it go. Let's stop fighting. Everything we do is turning out to not work. And we just keep on doing it because I'm so angry and I'm so motivated that I got to bring justice. And like she said, unfortunately, it's not going to bring Ellie back. Whatever happens, Ellie's never coming back. And even all the other people who lost their lives, they're never coming back either. Is it worth it to keep going just to put him in jail? Sometimes it's easier to let things go. Like the forgiveness of it, it doesn't mean that what the person did or what happened, the situation, that it was right. It doesn't mean that. It just simply means that you've accepted that that's how it went and you're going to let it go. Oprah has a wonderful quote where she says, true forgiveness is giving up the hope that the story could have been any different. And that sits with me a lot because it's true. When you're just like, you know what, this had to happen the way it did. And it's not right. It doesn't make it right at all. But I'm just going to be okay with it. And sometimes, honestly, things that start out really shitty end up being a blessing in disguise. Now, I'm not saying it feels good to go through that terrible situation. I'm not saying that you will have this, revelation in a week, in a month. It may be years. But like sometimes you go, wow, if I had never gone through that thing, I would have never got here. And here is so much better than where I used to be. So I just thought this was like a brilliant breakthrough for Maddie. And I felt so good for her because I'm like, a lot of these 2 seasons, she has been fighting and angry and upset and just rehashing the loss of her daughter and the trauma and all of that. And so I thought, my God, if she's got peace about this is great. Okay, so now Julian, he's like, I can't believe it. And Maddie's like, I know, hell just froze over. So in the moment Maddie says that, Olympia goes, oh my gosh, I know what happened in our court case. So in their court case, a lady, she fell to her death coming down a ramp, getting off an airplane. And the airline is trying to say that Maddie and Olympia's client, that he was at fault because he didn't do the proper safety checks. He was also on meds that made him sleepy. And they're trying to say that he was careless because, you know, if a corporate company ain't got to pay out, they will always try to blame somebody else. He says he was on the phone because they say he was distracted as well. But he did everything like he was supposed to. He knows that he was not at fault for this lady dying. So it turns out that there are these cylinders that's in the ramp and they have fluid in them. And these fluids are usually replaced 6 months to a year. And so typically the airline replaces them every 6 months, but to save costs, they started doing it yearly. Now, technically that's in regulation. However, the fluids can start to break down in inclement weather. And on this particular day, it was -6 degrees outside. So they do a demonstration in the court that shows the fluid had frozen. And so the defense, they're like, oh, we had an engineer, he came through, he checked, the fluid wasn't frozen. Well, the fluid on the inside wasn't frozen because the engine had been on and it was warm, it had melted. But the fluid on the outside where she went down this ramp, it was frozen. So when she stepped on the ramp, the fluid cracked and the ramp fell, and that's how she died. And so they win their case. Yay. Julian, he goes to meet with Senior because this is now the merger day. They're having this big celebration. You know, Senior's going to retire. He's making a speech, all this stuff. Julian, he goes to meet with Senior and he says, oh my gosh, Dad, I got approached by the DOJ. They said they got all this evidence about the well-Brexit study, the one you told me to remove. And, you know, Senior's like, because remember, Senior knows that they after him. So he pull open Julian's shirt, and of course, Julian's wearing a wire. And I'm thinking like, Julian, we already went through this scenario where we said he would probably figure this out. Why did you come and try to get him on tape? Senior is like, I can't believe you betrayed me like this. And Julian's like, betrayal? You've been lying about having dementia. And so Senior is like, well, I have. And he said, but that's because I'm always going to be 2 steps ahead of you. And I guess that must suck for you. And so Julian is like, but you didn't think about this. He said, when you went and put that study back, you reset the statute of limits. And he said, now we got more time to put you in jail. And so then this is when I said, flipping of the script here. Because at this point, Senior starts incriminating himself. And he's like, you know what? I never should have had you take that study out in the first place. I should have had the wolf do it, like I said in the beginning. And he said, but you were so eager to please like you always are. And so Julian says, well, I'll just go to another partner and I'll tell him. And he says, surprise, all the partners know. And he's like, you lose again, Julian. And I said, something. Julian got another wire on or something, but I bet they recording this because I was like, Senior got way too much information for it to be like, nobody's going to use this. So I said, something. They still got you, Senior. They got you right here. We're at the merger celebration now. Hunter finds out that he got a glowing letter of recommendation from Olympia and he's safe in the merger. So he gets to keep his job. So he's like, oh, thank God. So Sarah, she comes up and she congratulates him. And she said, you know, I want to apologize because lately I've been really, you know, intense because she's been mean to him and stuff. And she says, but guess what? She said, I got a one-on-one with one of the new partners. And she said, you know, she wants to hear about my cases and stuff. So I think I'm about to get scooped up by her. She said, I'm going to get out of here early because I'm going to go home and, prep. And so Hunter's like, okay, be well. And Sarah's like, well, it ain't goodbye forever. And he's like, well, if you keep being intense, it is. And she's like, oh. Olympia and Maddie, they like, you know what? Let's get on up out of here because Senior about to give his speech. And they like, we don't want to be here for this. We can't stand being around him for another moment, knowing who he really is. And so they walk out, going downstairs. Y'all, the DOJ is in full force. And I said, I knew it. So Maddie, she sees Lena and she says, and Lena's like, go, go, go. And so everybody starts running. They going upstairs. And I said, yes. We see a flashback to when Julian was talking to Maddie. And he's like, so you can really let this go. And she's like, yeah. Julian says, well, I can't. I can't do it because if I don't stand up for this, then I'm just like him. And I don't want to be like him. I can get him to confess. So Olympia's like, Julian, you don't have immunity. Like, you would be risking your career in jail time. And Julian's like, I don't care. So he calls up Lena at DOJ and he's like, look, what do you need for us to convict my father? And she's like, well, at this point, a solid confession. And so he's like, okay, well, if I wear a wire and go in there, asking about Royal Brexa, he's going to know immediately what's up. And so she's like, all right, let's use that to our advantage. So earlier, Maddie and Senior were on the elevator together. And he's like, oh, hey, Maddie, I ain't seen you in a while. And she's like, what's that you got? You got your speech? And she leans over. He said, no peeking. You can hear it in full, in a few minutes. And she's like, okay. So while they were doing that, she slipped a pen with a recorder down in his pocket. Senior never noticed a thing. This whole time, he has been recording his own self. They're like, yes, we got his ass. Senior and his croonies, all of them get arrested mid-speech. Y'all, Maddie is like, I wish we were there to see their faces when they got arrested. And Olympia's like, yeah, better to not be there and miss their faces than for the public to see our faces. Olympia says, you think Eva gonna start talking first? And Maddie's like, most definitely. And boy, was they right. As soon as they clapped the handcuffs on Eva, she said, I want to make a deal. I'll talk. I'll work with y'all. And Julian, he gets arrested as well. They're like, it's fine. Julian, he could probably still get a deal out of all this. And then they're like, yeah. And even if he don't get a deal, he'll be our first client for Lawrence and Matlock. And then as Julian is being handcuffed, Senior is being walked by him in handcuffs. And Julian goes, worth it. I was like, got your ass. So Sarah and Emmeline, now they show up at Maddie's house, Maddie's real house. And so they like, what you doing here? And Sarah's like, well, I have a one-on-one with one of the partners from the law firm. And she's like, do you also know her? And Emmeline's like, well, I did work at the law firm forever. And she said, yeah, I'm here to groom her dog. And they're like, okay. So they ring the doorbell. Out comes Edwin. And he's like, hello, my name is Edwin Kingston. And Sarah's like, Kingston? And so he said, I believe y'all know my wife, Madeline. And he said, well, y'all know her as Maddie Matlock. Boom! And it ends. Y'all, this was perfect. I could not think of a better ending for season 2. And a better ending for this story. The conclusion, like, I breathed a sigh of relief. I was like, whew, we got him. And everybody is safe. I loved it. I thought this was brilliant. Shout out to the actors, the writers, everybody. I loved it. What did y'all think? Did y'all guess this? Did y'all see what was happening? You know, I started putting it together like very much toward the end. But anyways, what did y'all think of the season? Like, you know the deal. I'm your TV movie bestie. I'm on all the socials. I will see you on the next show, on the next episode. Bye, besties.